Today is one of those special days in our society. It's a time where families get together. It doesn't matter how much they like each other or how much time they spend together outside of this day, but this day they get together to celebrate Father's Day. The reality often is that fathers are not always with us, but someone decided that because we have a Mother's Day, we should also have a Father's Day. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, it's not a celebration like it is for a lot of other people. If you're like me, well, you can't really celebrate Father's Day with my father anymore. He hasn't been around for 45 years, more. And so you don't get to do it. That time's passed for the people that have lost theirs. Or maybe it's just because their father isn't really around, period. That's the way it goes in our society. But God's concept of family is all messed up in our society today, I believe, for the most part. Fathers and mothers, in a lot of ways, have become slaves to their children and their desires and trying to keep up with all of that. So this morning, I want to start by talking about a particular father in Scripture. This father is not one who is in his prime. This father, or in the strength of life, he's not a father who is strong and courageous anymore that leads his family. Instead, he is a father who is weak, weary, and old, and almost blind. And he comes to that moment when he recognizes he hasn't got much time left in this world. His life's journey is about to end. And so he calls his children to gather at his bedside. And when I say his children, I'm talking about full-grown adults that have families of their own. But he calls them, it says his 12 sons, and they've had a lifetime of experience. He's had that with all of them, or most of them. And he gathers them to him because he's sick. And he senses that death's door is knocking. And he lays his hands on them, one at a time, and he blesses them. And what he says to them is very interesting if you read it. It is a blending of several qualities, but he is shutting things down in his life and tidying up any loose ends, so to speak. Now, when the sons come to his bedside, they're all grown men, because if you remember, Jacob is now down in Egypt. And his second youngest son, Joseph, is growing up in Egypt, and he's actually running the country, or he's one of the leaders in the country. So he begins by laying his hand on Reuben. Reuben's the first one. He said, "You are my firstborn. You are my might and the beginning of my strength. You, however, are unstable as water, and so you will not excel. You defiled your father's couch with his concubines. You are going nowhere in life. Wrong attitude, bad motives." I don't know that I'd call it a blessing necessarily. I mean, it's not what we would define blessing as today, but this is what he says. And then he comes to Simeon and Levi, and he does that. He says, "Boys, you have been cruel. You took the men who came to us in good faith, and you took advantage of them, and you killed them." And I don't know if you know the whole story of Jacob and all his sons, but each one of them is describing something that they had done in their life, some sins that they had grown up with. He said, "Cursed be your anger and your wrath, for it is vengeful and cruel." And then he comes to Judah, maybe the one bright spot so far, and he says, "You are the one. Your brothers are going to praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children will bow down before you. Judah, you are a lion's cub, as the lioness who dares to arouse him. The scepter will not depart from you, nor will the ruler's staff from amongst your feet until Shiloh comes." And Shiloh there is Jesus. But anyways, "As you know, from his lineage came King David, and Solomon, and eventually Shiloh, Jesus Christ, the house of David. Judah, the bright spot that was born to Jacob. Then he lays his hand on Zebulun, and he simply says, you'll live by the sea. You will be fishermen on the coast. Not a whole lot of promise there, really. Issachar, you are strong as a donkey. You will see land as good, and you lean your shoulder into it and labor and toil. I don't know how much is really there either, but they'll be workers of the land. Dan, you will judge your people, and you will be like a serpent by the road, a viper in the path that bites a horse's heel so that the rider falls backwards. I think today we just call that a backbiter or a backstabber or something. And by the way, Dan was the tribe that always headed up apostasy in Israel. Raiders shall raid Gad, but he shall raid their heels. Okay? Asher, your food will be rich. So Asher's clan were the ones that provided all the food for the kings, food fit for a king. Naphtali is a doe, fleet of foot, and who bears beautiful fawns. Well, that imagery, I think you can figure it out. The women of Naphtali were renowned for their beauty, and I'm not sure how that helped them. Then he came to Joseph, and he said, my favorite son, oh, Joseph, my son. He came to Joseph like that. He said, this is the boy, of course, that in the previous chapters, if you read them, would say that I thought I'd never see you again. That's what Jacob thought. But here you are, and you have two sons of your own. You see, Jacob's life was refreshed for a time because he had Joseph back in his life. His brothers, if you remember, had taken the beautiful coat of many colors, and they had soaked it in blood and laid it down before Jacob and said, is this your son's coat? And Jacob said, yes, it is. They said, it looks like the animals got him, because they didn't like Joseph, because Joseph was preferred by Jacob. So Joseph, he says, you are going to be a fruitful bough. You will be blessed by the Almighty God, who has sustained you all these years. Your brothers set themselves against you and harassed you, but you were unfazed by it, and you remained firm and steadfast. You will have God's blessing heaped upon you, who was set apart from your brothers. Wonderful Joseph. Oh, how I love Joseph. That was Jacob's thoughts on Joseph. And last of all, he places his hand on Benjamin. Benjamin, if you remember, is the youngest. And he says, you are a ravenous wolf. You will devour the prey in the morning, and you'll divide the spoils in the evening. Guess what the tribe of Benjamin was famous for? They were the fiercest fighters in all of Israel. So these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and these are the blessings their father gave them. He blessed them. He blessed each one of them, if you can call that a blessing for most of them. He blessed them by the experiences that he had had with them as they were growing up. So let's take a moment here and get a grip on what their father did. What was the blessing that he gave them? What happened in this moment of life's time when they all stopped and he laid his hands on them and passed something on to them? Looking at it carefully, you see that he first talked about what had already been done. Okay? Much of these blessings were simply a recounting of the sins or the things that they had done in their youth. He rehearsed these things that they had done growing up, and now were grown men. And he says, I'm recounting them partly, in some cases, to your shame. He saw clearly who they were given the circumstances. Fathers, in this room, as you observe your children growing up, don't you see kind of clearly who they are? Don't you see the tendencies they have, the ruts that they sometimes fall into, the way they act and the way they walk and the way they talk? Don't you realize the sins of their youth and those things that perhaps you thought were all just passing and temporary, and maybe even when they were smaller, they were really cute? All of those things. You remember those things. Jacob took that and he said, this is what you did, and so this is what I see from you in the future. This is the direction I see you taking in life. And I see you continuing on. And the children that you have will be born and will do those same things. So he blesses them with his predictions. This is where you will go, and this is the kind of people you'll be. This is the kind of offspring you'll raise up. They'll be your spitting image. And all 12 of them had to sit before their father and listen to them one at a time. And they heard what they were for each one of them. All of them heard what it was for each one of them. And so we look at that and we begin to see what a tremendous influence fathers are and fathers have on their families. Based on what you have done, I can tell you what your descendants will be like and how they will turn out. That's what he said. Fathers tend to be more silent and to use fewer words sometimes. They have a tendency to intervene probably less often, but they are always in the background with that assuring, steady influence that every so often opens itself up. So what about it, fathers? What are your chances with your children? If I follow what Jacob did, who was later known as Israel, I come away realizing that we get to do about the same thing that he did with our children. We get to look at the lives of our children and watch them develop and watch them grow in various stages of their life. We kind of try to mold them as we watch them and push them and nudge them where they ought to go and all of that stuff. But we also have to recognize that they really are and what they, or who they really are and what they really are and what they need. So you see that and you might say, well, we are like guides along the way. We are the perimeters of their lives, and we're kind of laying the structure for their lives that they are to live day in and day out. And a lot of that comes from our lives as fathers. How they see us is how they're going to be. Do you realize that 89% of men in jail today, in the U.S. anyways, I got these U.S. stats, came from fatherless families or from abusive fathers that weren't really fathers. And the same, 98% of the men on death row are from fatherless families. There's a reason that God designed the family the way he did, and he gave a role to the fathers. But our world has tried to erase that in a lot of cases. Raised without a father who would lend no structure to their lives and limits their aspirations, the son is going to end up doing things that are not acceptable behavior. It'd be like all of us living without the structure of God. And we still live in a world that has some of the structure of God in it. And when that goes, it's going to be awful. You may have heard this before, but I really think it illustrates what I'm saying really well. This is a father speaking. He says, my son arrived just the other day. He came into this world the usual way. There were planes to catch and bills to pay, and he learned to walk while I was away. And he was talking before I knew it, and he grew and he said, I want to be just like you, Dad. You know, I'm going to be just like you, Dad. Well, the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, the little boy blue, and the man on the moon. when are you coming home, Dad? And I don't know when, but when I do get home, we will get together and we are going to have a good time. My son then turned 10 just the other day, and he said, "Thanks for the ball, Dad. Come on, let's play. Can you teach me to throw?" And I said, "Not today. I got a lot to do." "That's okay," he said, and he walked away, but his smile never dimmed, and he said, "I'm going to be just like you." Well, he came home from college just the other day, and so much like a man that I just had to say, "Son, I'm proud of you. Want to sit for a few minutes?" And he shook his head and he said with a smile, "What I'd really like, Dad, is to borrow the car. Can I have the keys, please?" Well, he came home. I was proud of him, but he got the car. So I've long since retired. My son's moved away. I called him up just the other day, and I said, "I'd like to see you if I could, if you don't mind." I called, and he said, "Man, Dad, I'd love to. I'd love to, Dad." But he said, "The job is so busy right now, and the kids are sick, and it's sure nice talking to you, Dad, but I got to go." And I hung up the phone, and it occurred to me, he's grown up just like me. You see, the influence of what we do and what we say sticks with our children. And it's an example, whether you like it or you regret it or you don't like it, it doesn't matter. It's an example to the children. And so we got to be very careful how we do things. That is the power of influence. Never, ever underestimate it. The power of example. Boys and girls turn out just like you and me. Now, I don't always like that, but that's how the cookie crumbles. You see, God put power in the father's role. He had a purpose and a plan for the father's role in life. Then you stop and you think, and yes, that's part of what we do, but the other part is that God sends us a child that is designed just the right way for that child. And it isn't like any of the other children, but he or she is unique unto themselves. Some read Proverbs 22:6 and it says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." We often focus on other things and we want them to be, but it says we should focus on in the way they should go. Children are so different, and they come with a blended temperament and a personality that makes them unique to themselves, not just for a time, but for life. So we have this work to do, and we can't make them be something that they can't be, but we got to work with them to be what they can be. And so some have one talent, some have another. I can't really sing, but Brock and Dee can sing. So what do you figure? Where did it come from? Maybe Diane. But no, God gave them a talent. That's a talent that they have. We have our influence. We have the things that are naturally come to them. And then we have one other thing that most people don't realize or don't have, and that's God. God standing always in the wings, so to speak, to help, always listening to our prayers. And as we raise our children, we do not get to the point that you may have had this experience. Maybe you do, and it'll come. Is there not a time when we say, "I don't know what to do"? Have you ever been there? I don't know what to do. What's going on here? How do I handle this? And you finally are driven to your knees and you ask God for help. And God's there to help. Show me the way to fix this. Get me out of this mess. Now, The trouble is, a lot of times we put ourselves into the mess, but then we want God to get us out of that mess. You run out of ideas and out of energy and out of reasoning, and you have nowhere else to turn. You talk to people and ask advice, and finally you say, you know what? The only option I really have is God, because I can't do this, and you just give it to God. There is, however, one thing I can tell you for certain. It doesn't matter how many things you have or don't have, or how much talent or skills you have or don't have. The point and time will come when you will have to realize that you are a blessing to that child. You have to understand that God wants you to be a blessing to that child. Each and every child is blessed and should be blessed by you, and they are also, by the way, a blessing to you from God. And you need to hang on to that. You may not be on your deathbed and have time to sit up with all the last strength you have and lay your hands on your children, but guess what you can do? You can be a blessing every day that you have to your children. You can bless them every day. And it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You can be a blessing to them. Every father should be a blessing to his children and should bless his children. My father, like Jacob, called me to his side one day. He had cancer and he was dying. And I hadn't particularly been really nice to my dad. And he said, David, I want to talk to you a few minutes. And he was out of breath pretty much. But he said, I've noticed that you often seem angry. Why is that? What is going on? What's that anger all about? Why are you so bitter? He told me that, and then he said, that kind of thing is going to get you in a whole lot of trouble in your life. And so in a way, he told me what my future looked like based on what he saw in me. Well, I tried my best to tell him, hey, Dad, I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. I'm okay. Everything's good. But that's not what he was reading. And it turned out that in my younger life anyways, young adult life, my father was right. I got in all kinds of trouble because of my anger. And I had to sort that out. And I figured out a lot of the anger was with my father, which was unfortunate because he passed away 2 weeks later. And I couldn't do anything about talking to him about it and straightening it out that way. But as we already have noted, God has a way of working with us also. Now, some people don't get the opportunity to say goodbye, but for me, I got the chance to say goodbye before he left. In fact, I was right there when he passed. He had that intuition, though, and took the opportunity, you might say, that he could still talk to me before he left this earth. But you have the power to do that every day. God has entrusted with you fathers so much that he's given you each child to raise up properly the way he wants them raised. You see, children just develop as they grow, they change, and they become something that is inevitable. And so we as fathers are doing everything we can to influence that for good. No matter what their temperament is, no matter what their character is, it can be influenced for the right things and for good. And that's our job. When I was 19 years old, I had a friend, he was about the same age as me, and he fought with his father all the time. I remember the fights they had, and I kept saying to him, your father's not that bad. And his father wasn't that bad a man. But he left home, and he didn't talk to his father, and he continued to be angry at him, and I encouraged him to go back and settle things with his father because I'd had that experience. And he didn't do it. And then one day, his father passed. He had a heart attack, and his son didn't go to the funeral. But later on, as he was getting older, he started to realize the error of his ways, And so I think today he still, probably if he's alive, is living with regret on how he handled that situation with his father. You know, that is no way to treat a father. And I'm talking to the children now. That is not how you want to remember treating your father. Talk to him if you are upset, and reason with him, and take care of whatever is bothering you so that you can get along with your father, because your father is an important part of the family design by God. Fathers in many ways stand in the stead or as a shadow of God in a child's life. So much is heaped upon fathers, and just as many glorious opportunities we have as fathers. But a lot of times the children will look to their father, their earthly father, to see that's the imagery they get of their heavenly father. And so one day you want to be the father that can place those children back in the hands of God that he blessed you with, and they are servants of his in his kingdom of life. This morning, maybe you haven't treated your father as you should have, or if you have had a father who was or is less than he ought to be, but there's still a bright spot here for you this morning. You may not be able to work things out with your father, but I guarantee you that you can have God as your father, and God as your father will never let you down. He is never so angry that he will quit with you or quit reaching out to you. He has always loves you when you are down and out and wrong, as much as he loves you when you are up and obedient and right. He loves you and always wants reconciliation with you. He always cares and nurtures and understands and will encourage you and lift you up where you ought to be, because that's his nature, that's his character. He demands obedience, yes, but that is because he loves you. If he didn't love you, he would abandon you and leave you to your own devices, and we all know where that ends up. So if you're not a Christian, or you are missing out on a great father who wants to be with you, who wants to be your father, who wants to raise you up to be like his perfect son, Jesus Christ. And so if you need to respond this morning, we ask you to do that now while we stand and sing.